Hey, welcome to the Lost Beat 6 show. Thanks for making the scene. We got a great show for you today. We got Mikael Jorgensen from Wilco. He's our guest today. Very happy he was able to join us for the show. Before we get into any of that, I'd like to. I consider itself a little culturally tone deaf if I didn't discuss or at least mention that we're doing this the week after the Capitol was raided, and I don't really want to go into deep political thought. I tend to go down a rabbit hole with people. I tend to give a lot of context, and it's kind of one of the reasons why I end up having these strange sentences and questions, even with our guests that have these like prefaced sentences. I'm doing it right now. But the point is, I think we're going to be okay. I really do. I think, I don't want to make. I mean, I tend to be an absurdist, and usually try to laugh to keep from crying or to embrace the craziness. And I really don't want to come off either insensitive or even like I'm not taking it seriously to either element. So I want to make sure that everybody knows that I'd be happy to take any sort of conversations off this time if you want. I'd be happy to. I'm not going to go down any messages, but basically, we do like to talk about things. We do. I do believe in some sort of open conversation, but right now it doesn't seem to be that's happening. And it doesn't seem to happen when you have, when certain cults and irrationalities tend to manifest themselves. All I'll really say is I'll just quote, I'll have to quote, I think it was Maya Angelou, and I got this from somebody else, so I should probably credit them, but, he's using the same quote. So, people tell you who they are, and you should probably believe them. So that's all I'll really say on the matter. I think this will be more of a time. I'm going to try to avoid any opinion blasting until we kind of have a little time to let this sink in, let it bake, and figure out what really is what the right course of action is to take. I think it sounds kind of counterintuitive to the time, but that's just the way my Socratic brain works. And anyway, if you want to talk to me about it, you're welcome to. You can reach out at LostBeat6, Steven at LostBeat6.com, or any of the socials networks we have. Okay. One more thing before we move on to Mikael is so we have one of our artists, David Sparrow. We're coming on the second anniversary of our release of his album Beggars and Choosers, and we would like to launch a vinyl campaign. So the deal is, if this is something you're interested in, the way these vinyl campaigns work is that it kind of works like Kickstarter, where you have to like sort of pledge a certain amount, and if you reach a goal, then they press them, and then you get your record. It's actually pretty simple. I kind of like it a lot because it really avoids that sort of dread of ordering 500 copies and hoping someone buys 2 or 3, and then you have like a garage full of plastic that you really can't dump. And if you have to dump it, you have to recycle it. It's sort of a depressing waste of $2,000 or so. So anyway, I think if this is something you're interested in, I know David's got fans out there. And if you please go to David's Bandcamp page. So David Sparrow at Bandcamp. You could search it in the Bandcamp site. We have a link on the website at lostbeat6.com. You click either from his artist page or just click on the store. So you go to so the store on the Lost Beat 6 website is basically, it's our Bandcamp. And that's all we're selling right now. So if you're interested in us starting a vinyl campaign for you to purchase if you're a fan of David's and you would like to buy a vinyl record and support him, what we need you to do is, follow, at the very least, follow us, follow David on his page. Let David know, let us know, And the best way to do that would be even just to follow him on the Bandcamp, and that way you can always stay informed when that campaign is happening. So hit us up. Okay, our guest today is Mikael Jorgensen, pianist and keyboard player, most notably known for his work with Wilco. Officially joining Wilco in 2004, Mikael cut his teeth in the New York, tri-state, New Jersey area, forming groups that would become Lizard Music and others. Over the past decade, Mikael has spent his time between Loft sessions and tours collaborating with multimedia projects like NASA-inspired Quindar and experimenting with classic song arrangements with these Expandards. And we talked about that during the history of that, and kind of got an idea of what life was like on the road with Wilco up until the point where we all had to stay home. It's turned out to be a very productive time for him, and has come out with sort of a reunion with Lizard Music called Arizona, which is now available on Bandcamp as well. And I think they're working on a physical release, which it's in the works. So check that out as well. We'll have links in the show notes. So yeah, it was really good to talk with him. Really enjoyed having him on, and being that he's sort of in our local community in Ojai, California. One note about the audio, and this is the embarrassing part for me, is that for some reason I got my inputs crossed in the recording, and for some reason the audio you hear from me is probably my computer from like 2 feet away. So there's a gate on there, so it sounds really bad. I sound really bad. Ryan Pressman's with us. He sounds fine, and Mikael sounds fine, and everybody's clear. So I want to apologize. This is it's really hard calling yourself an audio engineer and then having to apologize for bad audio that you're in control of. So please don't hold that against me. We're learning as we go here. And anyway, let's start the show. All right, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
And Ryan's here too. How you doing, Ryan?
Doing all right, thank you. How you doing?
Pretty good. Yeah, Mikael, it's great to have you. Been wanting to have you on for like I said, quite a while. Appreciate you to help us out.
Sure, no problem.
How is 2020? So I know the tour, the Wilco tour, got canceled pretty close to March, correct?
Yeah, that's right. We had a tour scheduled for starting in Chicago, heading up to Canada, and then down the West Coast, ending in I think our last show was in LA or Las Vegas. And I flew out to Chicago, and we played 1, 2, 3 shows. We played Madison, Duluth, and then Winnipeg. And as we were driving from Winnipeg to Calgary, that is when the gatherings of 250 people or more were banned.
Okay.
And I flew home from the middle of tour, which has never happened in my almost 20 years of playing with Wilco. So that was unprecedented, and I felt how sort of serious it was at that moment. Like, wow, if Wilco has to cancel a show, or if there's some scheduling conflict, it's always made up. The show is rebooked and the tickets are honored and will come back. It's very rare that Wilco will just cancel a show, and certainly cancel a tour. And so it was quite profound to play 3 shows out of, a 6-week, 5-week tour, and then pack it in and go home. And then, the first few weeks was just like, okay, well, I'm home, and we just can go out and get groceries and stay home. And like that first week felt slightly scary, but mostly cozy, if that makes any sense.
It does. Yeah, it does.
And of course, nobody really had any idea how long it was going to be. If we're going to be, is it going to be a month? Is it going to be 2 months? Is it going to be, 3 months? And as the weeks and the months sort of ground on, it became very clear that it was going to be a long time. before any of us were going to go back to anything resembling what life was like prior to Friday the 13th, March 13th.
Was it really the 13th?
That's when I flew home to.
Okay.
I actually flew to Santa Barbara to try to not be in LAX.
Right. Yeah.
At first, it was pretty like dark and scary, and then I just discovered that I had all this time, and I had built a small studio setup in my house. I mean, it's really just it's a monitor and a keyboard, my laptop, headphones, and a microphone. And I just decided to just take the time that I have been sort of forced on me. And I've been writing like crazy, and I have made 2 records and finishing a third, and countless collaborations, maybe not countless, but several collaborations that's all sort of stacking up and queued up, ready to be released in 2021.
That's fantastic. That's
not taking the shit lying down.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear that stuff.
Yeah, I'm always worried that I get this thing in my head where I'm not, like, you have this giant gift of time and just make sure you just keep grinding, you know. It's like, oh my gosh, the pandemic, the quarantine's gonna be over and I have nothing to show for it, you know. That's been a mild conscience in my head, so I'm trying to make sure we all get done. So it looks like you're doing two and a half or 2 and almost 3/4 albums, projects done. That's fantastic news.
Yeah, and one of them's already come out. It's Lizard Music, my band from New Jersey, my first ever.
Oh, nice.
band. We started trading files back in, I think it was August 18th. We have it. I have the date remembered because we finished it the week before Thanksgiving. And so it was like, oh, it took us 2 months to make this record. Just trading files back and forth. We contacted our drummer, who we all used to live in New Jersey, and we're kind of more of a performance art project disguised as a rock band or a pop band.
I'm always down with that. I grew up on Genesis, so we're all good there.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly, it wasn't like it wasn't math rock or the kind of prog rock feeling of Genesis. It was certainly like Soft Boys meets the Beatles meets like elements of like the wackier, silly elements of Frank Zappa.
Okay. Yeah.
And you know, that was the band where we all learned about the world of music that existed beyond what we already knew. So we all started discovering other bands and other music at that point, because we were just like suburban New Jersey. My dad was a recording engineer, and so I had a lot of experience and exposure to, you know, the process of recording music. And so that was never, you know, the joke is, do you choose your path or does the path choose you, right?
Yeah,
I don't know that I ever had a choice.
Sure.
And so we made we recorded music on our own. We played shows in Long Branch, New Jersey at the Brighton Bar. There was a coffee house called the Inkwell, and we played open mic nights there on Tuesdays. And we played the Stone Pony, the Fast Lane, T-Birds Cafe. And we would play a few shows in Manhattan. We played at CB's once, and then we played like Chennai and sort of like the usual suspects spots in New York in the early 90s. To absolutely no clamor, no acclaim. Nobody gave a shit. But we played one show at the Brighton Bar in Long Branch, New Jersey, which was promoted by this guy, Jacko Monahan, who the guy is a patron saint of music on the Jersey Shore. I mean, there are so many bands and there's so many people that I wouldn't know had it not been for this one guy who, out of the goodness and kindness of his soul, would put on a matinee show in February at a cafe at the beach. You know, there's nothing quite as bleak as like February, New Jersey
Oh my goodness.
on the ocean, but it's sort of romantic at the same time. And so we would play those matinee shows, and then he would do a whole nother show later that night. And I can't imagine that it was ever quite profitable, because when you're having teenagers and 20 somethings playing shows, there's nobody buying drinks at the bar.
Yeah. And that was that one of those gigs where you get your. Was there any compensation at all besides bar tab or?
Oh, I mean, there was, but it was usually like the 40, maybe 40, possibly even 20 people that were basically like our close friends, our girlfriends, and then like the 3 or 4 people who were fans, basically buying us dinner. And we would play a show, and we would get $100. We would split it 4 ways, and that was that. And then did that, and we got signed to a label in LA called World Domination, and that was run by Dave Allen, the bass player of Gang of Four. And we made a record. We recorded with Steve Albini at his house in Chicago.
Oh wow!
In '94. And
is that pre-electric then?
Yeah, it's pre-electrical audio. And then we went on a tour in the States. We did 3 shows opening for Per Ubu, Chicago, Minneapolis, and Indianapolis. And then we went out west to LA and did like showcasey record company kinds of shows.
Yeah.
And then we got an offer to go to England for a few weeks. We were very excited about that. And then it was like in that time that I had just discovered the music of Stereolab and the other bands that were the influences of Stereolab, like Can and Noi, and this sort of like kind of pivotal, crucial, central, early 70s German bands.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I want to do that. But being young, dorky men, we did not have the emotional tools to deal with compromise or trying to figure out a way to be able to have both the sort of pop thing and the sort of like more experimental thing. And so I decided to leave the band. And then there's a little bit more sort of personal drama, but the net result is like I left Lizard Music in the spring of 96. And then they went on to make another record. And, we had some bad blood, but then 10 years later, we got together to play a reunion show, which was fine, but it was just more of a looking backward and looking forward to like kind of building a new thing. Because I think we were all a little bit maybe like hesitant about getting back together and reinstating these relationships. But the water under the bridge, we were all civil and it was fine. And then this summer, I did an internet experiment where I asked people to overdub onto a bass line and a drum groove that I just put up on SoundCloud. People could download it and then record themselves and then send me their tracks. Eric Paparosi, the guitarist and singer, he's like, oh man, I was going to ask if you wanted to do this and maybe do like Lizard Music stuff again. And I was like, sure, there's literally nothing else going on. So why not? Let's just go for it. And what started off as a series of innocent text messages kind of exploded into this giant opus of music that has sort of taken us all by surprise. And it happened really quickly. We got in touch with our drummer, Craig, who had moved to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And he would go to a studio and he would record 3 songs in an afternoon or a day and then send us the tracks. And we haven't actually been in the same room since 2009 when we played that reunion show. It was really sort of comforting and completely surreal to be playing with those guys, because I would hear their parts and their playing as I was overdubbing on top of it. And it certainly is not the same as being in a room and playing at the same time together, but it was enough. And so that's how we came up. That's where Arizona happened. And that was, it didn't exist before, the summer. And now all of a sudden it's out and it's on Bandcamp. And we're finalizing a deal with a label that will be putting it out on vinyl and CD next year at some point. Oh, nice. So I'm looking forward. It's not totally done yet, so I don't want to say what it is. But it's going to happen, whether it's through this situation or something else. So And so that was something that kind of came out of nowhere, and with the time, and it really was just a matter of spending 3 to 4 hours in the evening from 8 till midnight or so. So it wasn't like a full-time job. I mean, I guess that's a lot of time, but it didn't take up every waking moment of every day. Yeah, it was, I don't know. I feel like the record sounds like the excitement and joy of connecting with people and playing music and making and creating something together.
How does the of course this is probably the first time you were forced to do a remote collaboration. I know that's sort of the antithesis of, I'm assuming, like sort of life in the loft. How does that compare with sort of like the Wilco creative machine?
Well, my early experiences with Wilco was recording A Ghost Is Born. Mm-hmm. And we recorded that at Soma Studios in Chicago. It's a studio that is owned and run by John McIntyre from the band Tortoise, and producer for Stereolab. And I mean, if you know who John McIntyre is, then you know who he is. But if not, you don't know that he's like a synthesizer collecting person and just like a real aficionado of really good sounding equipment. Mm-hmm. And so my first experience with Wilco was recording A Ghost Is Born at Soma. And I just sort of fell in love with the process and the music, and it became clear to them that I had more to offer than just engineering. And so during that record, I transitioned from just being engineering to just being a member of the band, and that was pretty exciting. And the whole time I was battling imposter syndrome, but it was great. It was. And so then the next record was Sky Blue Sky, and
which is one of our favorites.
That was one where we were all sitting in the same room and doing takes together the old-fashioned way.
Okay.
And then the chronology sometimes escapes me because it's been so long.
I think it's Wilco the album.
Wilco the album, and that was done in a similar way. And then after that was Whole Love. Was after that? God, it's so embarrassing.
That is actually my favorite.
I like two years of intense touring and traveling happened between each of these records. So there's so many experiences that are that happen in between the records coming out. So that's one of the reasons why that's what I'm going to blame it on anyway. And then for Wilco the album, it was a little less about collective performance and more about kind of drilling down on. Jeff would kind of hammer out a structure of some chord changes and some lyric ideas or vocal ideas, mm-hmm. and then we would sort of layer on top of it, and then he would write lyrics, and then it was a little bit more of a studio creation. And then subsequent records after that, it's Star Wars and Schmilko. They were kind of recorded at the same time. Almost all of that material was pretty much done by Star Wars. Or at least we'd all worked on it. And so, and it was like, this is too much for one record. Let's split this up into like a rock, kind of weird rock record, and then like a more sort of psychedelic, sort of strange soundscape record. And then, not Ghost, Ode to Joy was more overdubbing, coming to Chicago and overdubbing on takes that Glenn and Jeff had recorded.
Okay. Does Glenn live in who? Not to spell where everybody lives, but does most of the band live in Chicago, or is it most?
We used to all be there, with the exception of Nels. But yeah, John, the bass player, John Stearett, he's in Maine. Patrick lives in Nashville. Nels lives in upstate New York, and Glenn is in Chicago. I'm here. Jeff's in Chicago.
Okay, I'm gonna fanboy out just a little bit. Ryan and I collaborate together on each other's projects as well. And when we first started working together, Ryan had this tune, and we kind of based it, and my producer mind kind of wanted to base it off of One Sunday Morning.
Uh-huh.
And I think I have to say that's one of my favorite piano sounds.
Oh, well, we'll have to tell Patrick.
Yeah. Oh, is that him? Oh, shit.
Yeah. It happens all the time.
Oh, man. Foot in my mouth moment there.
No. It's not a problem. I mean, the thing that I do on that song is so techie and weird, it's hard to even explain to people what I'm doing. But all that weird sort of background texture is me. But yeah, that Patrick was just playing his nuts off on that song.
Okay. Shit. Actually, I just picked up the vinyl of that recently, and I didn't realize how that you guys played around with extended versions of that on the vinyl. So I was like, oh, this just keeps going. This is great. But anyway, the piano sounds are always fantastic, whether it's you or Pat.
It's a funny detail. I had originally asked for 2 mics on the piano, like even just something as sort of pedestrian as a 414, a pair of 414s. Mm-hmm. And then, so our engineer at the time put 2 414s up and then covered up the piano because we're all in the same room. So there's, trying to minimize as much bleed as possible. We were listening back to the playback and I was like, wow, this piano, it really sounds good. I was like, those are the 414s, man. They really sound good. And our engineer at the time was like, dude, it's one SM57.
Nice.
I'm like, well, you can't argue with results. I mean, it's that SM57 and the SM7 are. I mean, Michael Jackson recorded almost all of his vocals on an SM7.
Right. And I've heard where I heard this and where the interview was, but I think. And then Jeff almost exclusively uses an SM7 as well, right?
Not exclusively. He definitely has. He's been. I think earlier on it was a lot of SM7, but as the mic collection at the Loft has grown, he uses probably a U47 on the guitar, and then he's got some Telefunken microphone, which I can't. It sort of looks like a lollipop. I don't remember the model number.
Oh.
The CM6? I don't remember, but yeah, it's not sort of exclusively that. But I mean, for guitar amps, it's either a 57 or a ribbon.
Yeah, I think we also had some friends that worked at the time. They worked for AEA, and I think they were bringing prototypes to Tom. Schick.
Yep.
And
and we bought our first console from AEA.
Oh, nice.
It was a Sony 3036.
Was that from Wes personally, or?
I don't remember. I don't remember now how I found it because Jeff asked me if I would help build out the studio, and I was like, yeah, sure. That sounds like a really fun thing for me to do at that point in my life.
Yeah.
I don't have a girlfriend, so. This equipment will love me back, right?
Right.
I don't know how I discovered it. Nevertheless, I flew out to LA with my friend Chris Gerard, who is a guitar player and a friend of mine from back in the New Jersey days. And he actually is also the co-writer on Theologians because he and I were working on music.
Oh, nice.
And so he has that partial credit on that song. But he and I flew out to LA, picked up a U-Haul truck, went over to West Dooley's, loaded up the board, and then drove it back to Chicago in a few days. Yes, so that was and it was not that expensive for the time. I mean, it's kind of amazing to me as a person who's been in recording studios, to see what equipment is completely outmoded, and the technology that was adopted and then, quickly gotten rid of. How is it that we were all sold this bill of goods of why don't you eliminate your precision Swiss-made multi-track recorder, and here are 3 VCRs that you can record your music on. It's digital. And now who can even, I'm dealing with trying to get even just play old videotapes back so I can convert them to digital.
Right.
And it's what a mess. What a stupid mess. Anyway, sorry.
That's okay.
Meanwhile, there's some hipster who's like, yeah, man, this album was recorded on 3 VCRs, dude. This is awesome.
I wonder if there are any functioning ADATs right now. I would bet you there are 0.
Oof. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Who even has, or the DA88s, or even DATs to a degree. At least the Dash format, it was on magnetic tape, and it wasn't a VCR tape. Anyway, it's not that important, honestly. But I just think about all the music that was recorded on that format that's now unlistenable. You can't get to it.
Yeah, I think the only version I think of is the only ADAT album I can think of is like Nightfly.
Was that ADAT?
I don't know. It may be.
That seems early for an ADAT. Because Nightfly was like early '80s, but it was probably digital. It was probably
maybe I got the format wrong, but
it was probably like the Sony 2248 or 24. Yeah. What is it? I don't remember.
Yeah, ADAT was 91.
Yeah.
Shiner knows if he's still alive. I don't think
Nightfly was about 9 years before ADAT. So
okay,
yeah.
I don't know where you're getting your sources, Steve.
Well, foot in my mouth moment. Well, number 2. 0 for 2.
This is where the entertainment factor comes in. It's just Steve just eating feet.
Yeah.
That's a good name for the podcast.
Eating feet. That's not. Yeah, that's pretty.
I think people are going to think that's a different podcast.
Well, maybe they'll come for one reason and stay for another.
Yeah, that's. We might get more subscribers if we actually call it Eat Feet and just dupe them. It's all this inside baseball on recording technology.
The other project that I'm finishing up is, I don't know if you guys are aware of the Expandards project that I've got with my friend Isaac Corin. He's a singer here in Ojai. We got together a couple of years ago, and he and his brother have a business called Your Big Voice, and their primary objective is to find people or have people find them who don't have music in their life and help them write and record a song that they've written. So it's
nice.
People who work in advertising or insurance, and for whatever reason, music was never a priority or was never made to be a priority in their life, and they're at an age or an economic point in their life where they can just take the time and go through this process, and it's pretty transformative and amazing.
That's awesome.
And so he and I got together. We met at a kid's birthday party, because our kids are just about the same age. He's like, "Hey, let's do some writing together." And I was like, "Okay." You know what? I'm sorry. Back up. That's not how it started. I know. Isn't it funny how your brain revises history for you?
Yes. Sometimes for the better.
But more often than not, it's pretty inconvenient.
Yeah.
We met at a birthday party, and I was like, "Hey, do you like jazz standards? I have this idea to do classic American songbook tunes really slowly, like excruciatingly slowly. Like one song would be 8 minutes long.
Oh my God.
Like a Gershwin song, just slowed down and expanded, and so we got together, and that didn't work very well. But what we discovered is if I just play these songs, but with a synthesizer sound. I have an Access Virus TI, which is one of my favorite sort of the digital virtual analog synths. And I would just tinker around and find sounds on that keyboard. And I was like, "Oh, let's do Someone to Watch Over Me" by the Gershwin boys.
Okay.
And I just played a really it's sort of Enya meets Harry Connick Jr. And it was really exciting. It was really cool. It was I hadn't heard that before. And so we kept doing it, and we wrote, we recorded a whole bunch of versions of Round Midnight, Angel Eyes, All or Nothing at All of Me, that sort of the Frank Sinatra kind of canon in a way. And it was really fun. And those songs can withstand so much manipulation and still be recognizable and enjoyable. We played a few shows in Ojai and in LA. I'm a big comedy fan, so I just reached out, and I don't use my Wilco card too terribly often.
Sure.
But there's certain moments where it becomes valuable for just people listening and saying, "Well, what is this?" And so we played comedy shows. We would just do 3 or 4 songs. There was a Hot Tub Time Machine with Kurt Braunohler and Kristen Schaal at the Virgil, and we played there, and it was Pete Holmes did a set, and Eric Andre was there, and I was like, all right, this is the right thing to do. And we played Dynasty Typewriter a couple times, and played the Standard Hotel, and it was really fun. But it was just like, it was sort of like, again, it was just looking backward. And then a friend of Isaac's, Isaac also lived in New York City for a while. We didn't know each other there then, but an old friend of his from New York asked if we would write a song in the style of All of Me, because she wanted to use All of Me, but learned that it's extremely expensive to license that song. And so she's like, can you guys do something that's in a similar style? And so we wrote something together, and it was just like, I was just playing chords and Isaac was singing. There was no plan. I was like, let's just start with this. Let's start with the same chord that All of Me starts with, and then see where it goes. And then that song basically formed itself. I think Isaac rewrote some of the lyrics and re-sang it, but I mean, it was like, we played it this way, he sang it that way, and we just had to kind of attack some of the obvious mistakes, or, things that we couldn't live with, but 95% of it was really exciting and interesting. And then that started us on this process of like, well, let's just do this some more. And so our kids were going to the same school at the time, and so we would have from about 9 until 10 in the morning to go to my studio, and I would fire up the computer, get a piano sound, and Isaac would sing, and we would just improvise 5 songs every morning. I would record Isaac, record myself, make a quick mix, and pop it up on SoundCloud so we could listen to any of them later. And so after, I don't know, a month or so of that, we had, 50 ideas, some of which were more developed than others. And so I was like, well, let's just start doing this. And so that was a while ago. That was like almost exactly 2 years ago. And then, Wilco tours start happening, and then I'm away for 6 months. And so there's like, work just sort of stops when I'm away. And so we kind of reconvened when I got home from the last Wilco tour in the end of 2019, and to sort of like, let's see what we can do here. And then I was just like, okay, now I'm going to really focus on this. And so I just started going to town, and I've always loved working in the studio, but I hadn't really, because I travel so much, my home studio setup, or my studio setup in Ojai was really like poorly looked after, and wires everywhere. And just because I would play a show with one of my other groups, Quindar, and like do a rehearsal and set everything up, and then take everything out and put everything back. And so it was just like the space that was always in flux. And then I just made a decision. I was like, you know what, this is going to be a studio, and I'm going to set this up, and it's like, nothing's going to go. I mean, we're locked down. The pandemic is here. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to play any other shows, so I'm just going to set this all up. And it was one of the best decisions that I've made because now I have a place to go and work and just make music. And that's pretty much all I've been doing this whole year. And it's the thing that's kept me sane, because this has been this is not news to anybody, but this has been a really difficult mental year. Financially, I mean, it is a mess, but I rediscovered my love of working in the studio. I mean, it's always been there, but there are so many amazing products, not products, like sample libraries.
Someone sounds like a label here.
There's a lot of incredible tools that exist that weren't really there maybe 5 years ago, or certainly 10 years ago. And then I contacted this guy that I've met 1 or 2 times, a drummer named Mario Caleri. Do you guys know Mario?
I'm reading your website, so I know Ojai. So
yeah, so Mario's been an LA session drummer. He played with Ojai. He's been in the Wallflowers, and
oh sure.
And I asked him, I was like, hey man, would you want to play on some of this stuff? I mean, there's no budget, there's no label, but I just want to know if this is good or not. And he's like, yeah, sure, send me something. And then he was like, oh, this is super fun. I love this music. This is great. And so I was like, great, well, I can come down and, we can talk about it. He's like, no, don't come down. Oh, okay. Right. All right. Well, so he's like, yeah, let me work on it. and I'll send you something. I was like, oh, okay. I was like, is he going to get it? Is he like, there's all the stuff that I need to tell him. And then it turns out I didn't need to tell him very much of anything. And I would send him, at first I would send him stems, just like drum or bass reference drum track, lyrics or vocals and chords, like really simple. And he's like, you don't even need to send me that stuff anymore. Just make a stereo mix without the drums. Give me the tempo. And then he started just murdering it. It was incredible. I would send him a take, or I would send him a track, and then he would be like, all right, cool. How's this? I'm like, oh, this is amazing. But like, and just the only corrections I ever had to make were sort of form issues. Like, oh, you filled a bit too early. Just like wait 2 bars there, or, oh, this is a bit of a change here. So can you just do something different, a little lighter or something here? So it was very broad, non-micromanagey instructions. And so we've got, I don't know, 15 of those songs that are in the process of being finished up. And there's another, do you know a bass player in Santa Barbara named Randy Tico?
I don't think I do. It sounds familiar.
Yeah, he's like, his family is old California. I mean, there's a road here in Ojai called Tico Road, and that's his family. They originally owned a lot of Ojai, and
dang.
There was a huge drought. I mean, this is like 100 years ago, maybe not, maybe 75 years ago, and they sold all the land because of the drought that had happened and killed all the trees, and everybody left. And then they moved to Santa Barbara, which was probably not a bad idea at the time. So, but yeah, he played upright bass on a couple tracks, and then Kevin McCormick, another bass player, he's played with, everybody, like produced Indigo Girls and played with Crosby, Stills and Nash.
Okay. Yeah.
He's a friend of Mario's, and Mario's like, hey, you want to put bass on this track? And it was so good. Nicole Atkins is going to be singing some backup, but most of it is just Isaac and myself and Mario. And it's music that I don't know. You guys know when you're doing like the cool new thing in your life, like, that feeling, right?
Yeah.
You're like, oh wait, I've never done this before, and this is really something interesting that hasn't ever happened to me before, or it's never.
It's the excitement that keeps you awake at night. Right.
It's true, and that's really, and it's so I've had this Jekyll and Hyde 2020 experience. Like, it's been the worst ever, and trying to motivate my kids to participate in online learning and remote learning, and then at the same time, getting to work on this music that like fills me with that feeling that I remember having when I was back in New Jersey, listening to Beatles records or The Who, and like, what is this? This is it just fills me with so much joy and excitement. And I feel like because I haven't had to travel, that has been the thing that like has, like, I realize like that traveling has sort of like taken that energy in a way, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah.
Touring is great, but it's not easy. It's a lot of hard work, and it is like the day-to-day grind of like waking up on the bus and trying to find a place to poop that is reasonably not deadly. It's hard, and just never not having everything set up at home. I can just like walk into my room, turn on the computer, and start recording within a matter of 5 minutes. But if I need to do down the road, I have to like go find everything, put it all together, find a room, find a space, so this has been like the silver lining of this pandemic.
You might enjoy a record our friend made. His name is Dylan's Med. And I was like, cause he tours pretty regularly with an Everly Brothers cover band. And like he came out with 2 EPs about a year. How long ago was it, Steve? Like 2 years ago, a year ago?
About a year ago.
about a year ago,
Yeah,
and I was like,
quite
oh, this is awesome. And then I was talking to Steve. I was like, when, like, did he record this at his place in Nashville? And Steve was like, some of it, like the rest he recorded like in the touring van while it was moving. I was like,
oh, wow.
I was like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like that, there's no way you could get me to do that, like in any situation. But I admire the dude for doing it.
I was working on a project with them, and they decided we did all this. It's funny, we were all doing this recording. Their drummer is we've just finished this project, and we were waiting like 6 months because they live in Nashville, and they were doing their own vocals, and they're doing the whole thing where they're comping. No, they were recording. They're doing the Everly harmony thing. So there's two voices, one mic, figure eight, and they're but they were trying to comp, and they were doing these little. They had a couple like one-off shows that in places that were a little more open to that, and they were doing it. They ended up having this. They said they were trying to go out and comp in the car. They were comping vocal takes. I don't know how they were doing it, and it apparently didn't work out very well because they were just like, oh, this turned out really bad. That didn't work out exactly the way
that was a different record. I liked how Dylan's record turned out, but yeah, I haven't heard the Everly one yet. But yeah, that's kind of funny. Yeah,
I'm kind of on the. I just started touring. He was just weaning off the bus because he was starting to try to cut some costs. So I ended up most of the stuff. I never got that bus experience of touring. And apparently, so it's a little more of a cushier gig because it's just 3-4 people going into like smaller venues and theaters and whatnot. But I was just sort of getting used to like, all right, going places, seeing stuff. So I'm kind of like now I'm like back in the house. Like, man, I can understand that kind of.
I miss being in places. I don't miss the getting there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
yeah. The travel thing is not the places are fun.
Traveling the abstract
being en route is
good.
Yeah, that's a different story.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the bus. I mean, look, I certainly don't mean to sound like I'm complaining about anything because I have led a charmed life up until this point, and I'm grateful for every second of it. But be that as it may, being on a tour bus for 20 years, it's not your house, it's not your space, it's somebody else's, and then you're sharing it with 6 other guys, and so they're really like the days off and the personal time become increasingly more and more important.
I'm curious to know, actually, on that note. I'm sorry, was I interrupting you?
No.
Okay. I'm kind of curious, like, do you get, like, when you're on tour, does that kind of put you in a weird, I don't know if I'd use the word, I can't think of a better word, but like kind of like dissociative, kind of like hard to ground yourself kind of mindset?
Oh, absolutely. It's there's a strange kind of free fall experience because, at home, I have 2 children and I have a wife. We have a house, we have, cars. And I mean, there's all these things that need attention and managing throughout the day, dishes, whatever it is. And then you get out on tour and you don't have any obligations other than to play the show and to do sound check. And that's it. Those are your only obligations. And like, while that sounds great, you're just like, you have all of this time in places that are maybe not as inspiring to go wander around. In Europe, it's fantastic because you get off the bus in the morning and then you just go walk.
Right.
And that's just for hours. I love taking photographs. So I just bring my camera and I just go out and I just take pictures. It gets me out of the bus. It gets me moving. I'll find a cafe to get some breakfast or something. And then that's when I'm like, okay, this is great. This is fantastic. I just go walk around Brussels for 5 hours and then come back to sound check and then have dinner, play the show, and then get on the bus and go do it again. But, when it's wintertime and the weather is not nice and you're sort of just stuck in sometimes like a remote part of town and, even getting a ride to the city is like a while away, like then it's like, oh, well, I'm just going to stay at the venue and I don't know, do something. But it's funny because I've been having to think about this because with the news of the vaccines coming, it's like, oh, okay, we're eventually going to be back out on the road.
Right,
You know,
right.
possibly as early as next summer, we'll see. But but I was like, oh, I need to like bring my studio with me somehow, because this has been too great to not have this as a thing to do for the hours between 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning when I wake up till 4 p.m. when the sound check is, and then there's the time after the show. And so, yeah, it's like, I've been having to kind of like reconsider what my days will be like out on the road. And so, and it's, you know, it's challenging to have to every day, like, set up your world over and over again and find a shower and find towels. And, you know, like, if hopefully there's like laundry somewhere where you can get clean clothes that don't come back smelling like a psychedelic chemical flower.
Yeah.
Which is one of my big, stupid, annoying pet peeves. Fabric softener should just be unscented. That's it.
You heard it here first,
That's it.
folks.
No more. I mean, I sort of understand it, but it's just like those artificial scents to me, like, are just, I have this visceral reaction to them, and I can't stand it. So I tend to opt to do my laundry, even though our crew will send somebody to do all of the laundry, or they'll have somebody to do all the laundry, which is nice, but I can never trust that it's going to come back without just the worst smell. And again, this is a tiny problem.
You heard it here first, folks.
Let me be clear.
Michael Jorgensen is an anti-center, an anti-centite, if you will. No sense.
But, yeah, no sense.
How deep is the Wilco crew? I'm always kind of I've just the last couple of years I've just started working with like the local union. I'm not in the union, but they call me a lot for stuff for like the Santa Barbara Bowl, and I'm always kind of curious about the different sizes of different groups and like these like I think the first gig I ever did at the bowl was like Radiohead, and they had like 8 trucks for all their stuff. And then,
we don't do that. It's not that big. Like at the biggest, Wilco was 2 buses and 2 semis, but we were carrying all of our production. So it was like lights and PA, monitors, and backline.
Okay.
And
that's reasonable.
But that we've since scaled back to just advancing PA and lighting in every venue. Because I don't think people are necessarily going to the Wilco show for the big spectacle of it.
Right.
I mean,
right.
Radiohead is a different kind of organism, and that is definitely more about a gigantic theatrical presentation. And not to say that Wilco doesn't have that, but it's not really it's really a matter. You go see a Wilco show because the 6 of us are playing music together. And I mean, not to say that we haven't done sort of set piece stuff. I don't know if you guys saw the Schmilko tour where we had the forest set.
I missed that one.
No, I'm gonna look that up.
That was really cool. We had 3 different drapes made, so there was like a upstage, midstage, and a downstage curtain.
But they're still drapes, they're not video walls, right?
No, but I mean, it's still like, it's a bunch of, it was a bunch of production.
Right.
Oh, this is
and a bunch
cool.
of stuff to set up. Yeah, that was a really cool. There's a good recording of us playing in Brussels, actually, at one of my favorite venues ever, Ancienne Belgique in Belgium.
Oh yeah.
And it's a live show. It was like we were notified like a minute, maybe not a minute, but maybe like an hour before showtime, like, oh, we're live streaming this on video. And that was our first show in Europe on that tour. And that first show is always like, there's technical gremlins and there's problems to solve that aren't quite figured out. You're not really in the groove until your second or third show, but I don't know, maybe there's something to that nervous energy that makes that sort of special. But that's a really good show because it looks super cool because of the lighting and the drapes. And also our lighting designer, Jeremy Roth, who's been with us for, 10 years or so now. He's a good friend, and he was pretty instrumental in and getting that made and then lighting it every night. And he was like, this is the best toy I've ever had.
Nice.
But as far as the Wilco crew goes, I mean, we've got monitors, front of house, 1, 2, 3 guitar techs, drum tech, assistant tour manager, and merch. And sometimes we'll have like a PA tech or sort of like a floater kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's like usually about maybe like 8 to 10 people on the crew, and then 6 of us in the band plus our tour manager. So
Okay.
that's 16, 18, and then like 2 bus drivers and a truck driver.
And those are crews that are within the Wilco. They're not like what do you call it? They're not like rented out by Eighth Day or some other like the companies that rent out.
No, these are we've since the starting we've just been used. We just like have hire people that we knew and sort of teach them how to do the job.
Okay.
And it's only until recently where some of our crew members have like decided to change careers or just to work on a different job, and so in that we've now been getting some sort of pro crew guys who just know all of the mechanics and the demands of being on the road, instead of having to teach some young whippersnapper like, don't poop on the bus.
Oof.
It's a big no, and it's not obvious, and there's no signs.
Yeah.
It's never like you get in the bathroom and you're like, oh, there's a toilet, I'll just sit down, and there's no indication that like what you're about to do is not, it's going to cause a huge problem for our bus driver, who can then cause huge problems for all of us.
Right.
I mean, it's not that bad, but I mean, it's happened a few times, but not.
It's more like the casuals. If emergencies are emergencies, but like
Yeah, I mean, you can always pull over at the very worst,
Sure.
And usually you can get to some sort of,
rest stop or something.
a rest stop with like lots of like Full Moon Wolf T-shirts and quadruple extra large beverage containers.
I'm liking the in-depth logistics on touring we're getting here. This is really going deep.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
I noticed you guys have been doing the Solid Sound, right? The festival in Massachusetts.
Huh?
Was that kind of designed to be a couple? Because I know like the 6 of you have like very different individual projects going on. Is that kind of like a platform to like showcase all of your expanded universe, or?
Yeah, that's
For lack of a better word.
It's like the Avengers festival.
Yeah, right.
The Wilco cinematic universe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it was just, I think the idea to like have a festival was something that Jeff and our manager at the time had been throwing around. Like, it'd be cool to just do our own festival. And our manager moved from New York City to Northampton, Massachusetts, and had gone to visit Mass MoCA. And he had met Joe Thompson, the now former director of Mass MoCA, and was talking to him about like what could we do this here, and then one thing led to another, and it just started, and it really has turned into this incredible experience where, I mean, the museum has grown partially in as a result of the festival. So like the museum itself has expanded because there's more people sort of seem to know about it as a result of our festival.
Mm-hmm.
The town benefits economically in a way that hadn't happened prior to that. So it's, I think there was some estimate that like Solid Sound brings in something like $1 million to the local economy.
Oh, great.
Over the course of a weekend, which is great. I mean, unfortunately, it's only, our festival is only one weekend out of the year, but there are other events at Mass MoCA that happen that also draw people in. And but yeah, to answer your question, it certainly was a way for all of us to do the things that we do that's parallel to Wilco. I've got multiple projects, Pronto, Quindar, and then Expandards played last year, and then John and Patrick have their Autumn Defense.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick had the Mellotron Variations, which was a mind-bendingly good show. That was
cool.
one of my favorites. And then there's all the other bands that are invited that because we're not only like rehearsing like a big Wilco show, which could be like we did last time. We did Being There. We covered Being There and Yankee Hotel Foxtrot all the way through, like front to end. And but that was like we were trying to like go back to album arrangements rather than arrangements turned into live. And so we had to do a lot of rehearsing for that. The covers year, I don't remember which year that was, but we did a whole show of covers. That was a lot of work of just like drilling down all of the different covers, and like for me figuring out like what do I play on the television song. How can I not remember the name? Oh my God, this is embarrassing. The big long television song. You know what I'm talking about. What is it called?
Anyway, television song.
Is it television like a band or like a television theme song?
Tom Verlaine. Doo-doot, doo-doot. Anyway, what do I play on that song? But yeah, it was there's a lot of work that goes into that on our half, on our part. And then there's also the side project stuff, which usually needs to be rehearsed, and like getting people to North Adams and finding time and spaces to practice with everybody is a bit challenging. And then you have to play like a festival show where you just have to like set all your stuff up and play, and there's no sound check, so like, and then our families are there. So, you're being pulled in a million directions at once. And sometimes it gets a little overwhelming, but I feel like I finally hit the sweet spot of like, oh, okay, I'm just going to do a little bit less and enjoy my time instead of biting off way more than I can chew. But it's great. I mean, the last time we were there was 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, last summer, 2019. And it was really a profound experience because we had just come off of a long hiatus, and we'd done about a week's worth of shows in Europe, and we came back and we were all sort of still fresh and not sort of road worn. And we started at Masmoka, and it was like, I feel like I kind of finally saw it for what it is instead of what it was to me, if that makes sense. That people from all over the world spent their money and their time to come and be part of this thing. And it was just really special and really powerful to just meet as many fans as I could, because we just walking around in the between shows, and there's sometimes where that isn't great because like I have to be somewhere, and then people want to take a photo or get something signed, which I'm always happy to do that. But there's sometimes where it's like I really have to. I'm meeting somebody and like I have to be there now, and you can't say that, but sometimes it gets those moments. It's easy for me sometimes to kind of lose the plot, but this last time I was really struck, and it really was remarkable to be part of that whole thing once again. And I hope that everything that our leaders can figure this pandemic out, and we can get closer to it, if not get to it this year or 2021. I mean,
yeah, because I was starting to, and I was kind of prepping the show. I was thinking about like kind of trying to, even when I was talking to you about what is this show about, what are we trying to do, and the thing is, there's a lot of other certain like sort of what's the right word, manifesting groups that kind of manifest their own kind of, not necessarily destiny, but sort of their own creative, like this sort of community. They manifest their own creative community. That's the right word. And one of Ryan and my favorites, King Gizzard and Lizard Wizard. And
is that a Melvin's? What is that?
It's Melvin's band.
Is it a Melvin's related band?
No, I don't think so. They're out of Australia, out of Melbourne, and they basically they just did the whole garage rock thing, and then kind of built their own thing, and then basically had their own label, and then eventually, they're not claim to fame, but they just sort of do their own thing and are able to say, okay, we're gonna do 5 albums in a year, because they just crank this stuff out, and they're all different themes and stuff. But it's sort of reminding, and they also have their own festival and their own label, and kind of I've started to hit the parallels of like, DBPM and Wilco
Sure.
World and Solid Sound. It's sort of those kind of like, it's always sort of inspiring to see. Of course, they have both Wilco and King Gizzard. They have a very, very solid, dedicated fan base to kind of be able to share things with, and kind of I was even scrolling down the sort of multimedia art stuff, and just writing books, even like the notebooks. I was like, that's the cool thing. I'm always down with notebooks, and I'm looking at there's like everybody has their own designed kind of moleskin notebook. Yeah. It's like, oh, this is great stuff.
By the way, that television song is Marquee Moon.
Yes. Oh.
I didn't want to interrupt you because you were like rolling on the festival, and I was like, okay, I don't want to be rude. So
Yeah. Well, that's embarrassing. Anyway,
if it makes you feel better, I didn't know it either. So
yeah, it's like classic seminal no wave New York rock.
Well, I hope the best for your chili, but I think, you know what, Steve, if it's okay, that I kind of wanted to ask one more question, if that'd be cool, because we kind of started on a question that we had last time for that kind of spontaneously happened, and it's kind of a fun question to ask musicians, and yeah, I guess we could just roll on it if that's cool. Just one more.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, it's fine with me.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. So last time we had Ryan Elder on. He's a TV composer, and we were talking about like different like regional musics and stuff, regional musical styles. And he mentioned, Ry Cooder came up, Ludwig Göransson came up, people who like did destination records, basically. Like they traveled to the place where they wanted to make, kind of immerse themselves in a style or a culture of music, and then kind of make a record based on that. We want to know, like, if you could do that, where in the world would you go? Like, if you could immerse yourself in a musical sort of style and write around that.
It's funny. It's funny that you bring up Ludwig Göransson, and because the other thing that I've been also doing is I've been going deep on composing and scoring as of late as well. I'm working with a music house, writing cues for TV shows and theme songs and stuff. So that is definitely something that I am extremely curious and interested in. And I've been like, where I really want to, I would love to go to like the Newman scoring stage,
right on
Fox Studios, and
we've been there.
We've been there.
Yeah. Like, and then there's the Eastwood stage on Warner Brothers. I just like, it's still, there's so much more for me to learn about all of that and the mechanics of scoring and composing for orchestras. But I just can't shake it. I just keep wanting that to happen. Like to be able to, I don't think I could conduct necessarily, but I'm sure that I could eventually compose music that could be recorded either there or somewhere similar. So yeah, I would go to Hollywood.
No, right on. I mean, hey, that was not the answer I was expecting. So I wasn't expecting any answer at all. I mean, that was like specific, but I mean, that's actually kind of nice curveball that I like.
Gosh, Thomas Newman, like his scoring work is pretty unassailable.
Yeah.
I just watched The Player again recently, and that's so much better than I remember it was. And it's so much, there's so much more subtext that I didn't pick up on the first time I saw it. And I was like, oh, it's so, when films are good, it's amazing. But yeah, it's been all about, I've been doing so much research and learning and listening to movies in a much different way than I had been for the past, 40 plus years. And that's really what I would love to further, expand my toolkit and expand my vocabulary to incorporate, big orchestral sounds or even small orchestral sounds like that Thomas Newman American Beauty soundtrack. Mm-hmm. And even the Player, he did The Player. It's just so unexpected. These sounds. I mean, it's easy to hear it and be like, oh wow, it's great, but then it's another thing to be like, okay, the director shows you something, there's no music, there's no vibe, and it's up to you to come up with something interesting that works emotionally, musically, thematically, and the only way you get good at it is just to do it over and over and over and over again. And so I've just been writing almost every day cues for, it's certainly not glamorous at this stage, but it's really great practice to write pensive emotional number one.
Right. Yeah.
And to really, a lot of what I'm doing at the moment is not to picture. So that's a little bit, it's simultaneously more challenging, but also more liberating because I'm not dictated by what a scene is. But at the same time, it's really hard to imagine a scene that hasn't possibly even been shot yet that will select your cue to be used to emphasize or underscore a particular emotion or feeling for
like the Ennio Morricone style, where it's, you had to the actors needed the music to act that, all those westerns they did. Those I'm certainly familiar with Morricone, but I don't really know too much of his story or process. So I want to check it out. Oh yeah. I think this is when they first started doing Once Upon a Time in America, in the West. And basically Sergio Leone had Morricone write all the cues, write all the themes and the motifs for the sort of the moments. So they would play it during the scene when they were recording, because they all overdubbed the vocal, the dialogue anyway. And so they would have these they would act to the score, which is kind of a cool idea.
Yeah. So
it was very music centric in that kind of element. So it's all right, here's the stand down, or here's the shootout between Bronson and Fonda. It's and you get that. They have you can weigh the emotion into it's kind of cool.
I've also befriended a legendary Hollywood film composer, James Newton Howard, who is he's an Ojai resident.
Is that
and he's been unreasonably nice and generous with his time with me. Yeah, and so I met his team at his studio in Santa Monica about a month ago, and so I feel like I've got even the sort of the mentorship thing in place for when it really starts to happen. So
that's fantastic. It's also
we hope it takes off.
Yeah,
me too. It's so fun. I enjoy it immensely. The process is it's awful, but so rewarding. But you know what I mean? It's
sure.
when you're building a house or building something, and it's it's not the thing yet, and you're just I can't wait till this is done, and I want to do it right to make sure that when it is done, I'll be able to use it. It's that energy, that part of the process. It's ugh. I remember building the Soma Studios in Chicago in 1999. 6 months of I don't want to do any more masonry. I don't want to do any more drywall. I don't want to do any more painting. I just want to make records. And then eventually it happened.
It's that day. I understand that day-to-day grind of but if it's somebody you haven't seen, say someone hadn't seen you in a couple months, and all of a sudden you didn't have a studio, then you did have a studio. Wow, that seemed fast,
Yeah, totally.
Right, that perception. It's so funny. This is the second time in a row we've met the Alpha Class, or the Newman scoring stage got mentioned.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we Ryan and I went to Northridge together. That's where we met, and the music industry program. And part of that was you had to go to these different places. We had we go to ASCAP offices in Hollywood one day, and then we go to. Well, you went to Mike Elizondo's place. I didn't, but
you go to the Remo Drum Factory. They take you through the entire music industry, and you just look at everything. Look at this record label, Concord Records. Look at this manufacturing plant for music gear, and they everything. And you just go through, and they talk you through it. And it's kind of it's a field trip.
Yeah, it's basically what it is.
But it's nice to understand how vast and deep all the different kind of nooks and crannies are.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
And one of them was the Alf Clausen Simpsons scoring of a Simpsons episode, and we got to sit.
Where do they score those?
They were doing it at the Newman stage on the Century lot, and up until recently.
I've never been. It's going to happen. I can't wait for it. but I've never been, and I'm so excited to not only be able to go there and witness that, but have some stake or some part of telling a bigger story.
Is there stuff that you'd be interested in scoring, like, genre-wise?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much you get to choose that, right? I mean,
that's true.
I guess if I had to identify like a filmmaker, it would be Wes Anderson is probably the obvious, easy choice, But he's all cozy with Alexander Desplat. So
yeah, and he had Mothersbaugh before that.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I think writer directors are the way I would want to go,
right?
Rather than being like sucked up into the Marvel vortex or something like that.
For sure.
I mean, that's probably extraordinarily wishful thinking at this moment, but I feel like sort of like big indies.
Mm-hmm. The auteur route.
And, yeah, exactly. Because the composers that I've spoken with, they're like, those are the most rewarding because you actually have a conversation and you have this ongoing dialogue with the director, and you can really get down to the center or the core of what it is that a certain scene, a certain cue has to do. And there's a great Hollywood Reporter roundtable with Danny Elfman and Hans Zimmer and Alexander Desplat and a bunch of other people. And the thing that was really funny, or maybe not funny, but interesting to hear them all articulate in different ways, was the abject insecurity they all feel when they start a project. Every one of them was like, "Oh my God, I don't know how to score your movie." And I was like, "Oh wow, that's cool. That's kind of nice to know because I don't know how to score a movie right now. But those guys have been doing it for 30, 40 years." And there was something kind of reassuring about their honesty and saying, "I am not sure how this goes, but we'll start doing something and then we get to change it."
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then, it'll, do they have anything to say about like temp scores?
They hate them.
Oh,
They hate them completely. And it's, there's no perfect scenario anywhere, right? There's no, like, it's just, those are lumps you have to take.
Yeah.
I mean, you just have to, I haven't been confronted with having to write something that sounds like somebody else for some reason,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, I feel like I understand that dilemma, and an editor wants their edit to look good and sound good and to be satisfying or exciting or sad. And, so to add a temporary music track, like, oh, that makes it sound like the movie.
Yeah.
But that said, I mean, I have an editor friend that I've been sending her cues to like get my stuff into the temp that then license if they want to actually use it. So that's the other side of the coin.
It's true. Yeah.
Go that way. Well, guys, thank you so very much. This has been a lot of fun to chat.
Thank you.
I quote unquote see you guys.